I'm really excited to be showing this episode of the Northbound Show with what is, in my opinion, two of the very best founders we have here in our own region. Oscar from Epidemic Sound.
So you can bring it, but you have to show them that it's for real.
And Sander from Flatpay.
If they're discounting it to the same extent as they're discounting that overly aggressive plan, you lose, right?
Freaking awesome founders with great stories.
I wanted to portray this as small and boring because I didn't want any competitors.
They all replied. They all came back. They all wanted to speak.
You're in for a treat. First of all, with me today, we have straight from Sweden, the greatest founder in the world, Oscar. And the reason for me calling him the greatest founder is the first time I met him, we connected instantly. So I put down his number on my phone as the greatest founder there is. Hey, Oscar, how's it going?
Hey, Ken. Hey, Sander. Hey, everyone. I'm doing really well. I'm calling in from a beautiful Stockholm, and I'm super excited to join. Getting to sit down and chat with all of you is something I've been looking forward to immensely. So I'm very happy to be here.
I really appreciate you joining. And then the other guy who's on the call is equally impressing, probably one of the most impressive Danish founders, if not founders in Europe right now. If Apple redid their Think Different campaign right now with here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers, they would probably switch out Picasso with a picture of Sander. So Sander, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Yeah, I think we had to reschedule because there was no Sambuca in the first couple of invitations.
This would have been so much more fun in person because I think last time I shared a stage with Oscar. We had beers on stage also. So we'll do a follow-up in person at a later point in time. So look, just before we kick it off, maybe Sander, you can just talk us through what's happening over at Flatpay right now.
Lots of stuff going on at Flatpay. I think we're closing in on 100,000 customers. Business is just doing better and better. I think in March we did more customers than we did the first 24 months after launching. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff going on, and hopefully after summer we'll be able to tell that we're opening a new big market outside of Europe as well.
I could almost imagine what market that is, but we'll save that for another time.
You don't need a lot of detective skills to figure that out, but
No. Mexico! Here we come! What about you, Oscar? What's happening? Look, you stepped down over the last couple. You kind of retired and took a board position instead. So what's happening on your end?
So I'm a huge fan of two things being true at the same time. So you're absolutely right. From my perspective, I've been at the helm of Epidemic for now almost 2 decades. So pushing 20 years, or at least 18 and a half. And to that end, about 6 weeks ago, I decided now was a great time for me to transition from being the person leading the charge to being a person who sits at board level instead. Rather than being the jack of all trades and master of none, I get to spend much more time in a few distinct areas. And so that's on the personal end, which I'm adjusting to, thoroughly enjoying, but we can get to it later on, the transition and the role of the founder and the role of the builder, how that changes over the first week, month, decade, 2 decades. It's psychology 101. So I have tons of thoughts around that. But then business, similar to Sander, is compounding super well. A company that's trying to soundtrack the internet, the internet keeps on growing like crazy. Previously it was just humans creating content. Now we have more sort of AI production than we've ever seen before. This allows us to open up new avenues, new ways of producing content, scaling content, looking in different verticals. Suddenly everyone's a storyteller, and content without music is like food without taste. And so there's a huge demand, and we're running like crazy after it.
Being a Swedish superstar founder, we've heard all of that in so many podcasts and interviews in Sweden. I think the amount of times I've heard people giving credit to you as a huge inspiration source is getting shy of annoying. So besides all of that, maybe just the origins behind Epidemic.
Thank you, I think. But kidding aside, I think starting companies and becoming an entrepreneur is it's perspiration, it's inspiration, but more than anything, it's annoyance. It tends to start with a problem, something that bugs you, right? And for me, I was a recovering management consultant. I did that for 2 years, but I was really poor at it. So I transitioned to something else. My wife was working in TV production at the time. So I got drawn to that. I fell head over heels in love with storytelling. I was at this production company for a couple of years, and we made TV shows. I was hired there. I came from BCG, like this high-flying start to my career, which I left after 2 years. My friends thought I was an idiot. And I joined Zodiac, and my job description was make coffee. So I make a kick-ass cup of coffee, and then buy companies, and then run an IPO, and throw decadent office parties. And I could do all 4 of them like really, really well. But then eventually I transitioned and I got to be head of multimedia, which was super unsexy. It's aged, that expression is aged as well as my hairline, basically. But in multimedia, I got to understand earlier than most that YouTube was this once-in-a-generation transition. Storytelling was taking a massive step. And soundtracking the internet was a complete and utter shit show. So I'll stop shy of that. So I was fortunate to stumble on this opportunity where all content wanted to move online and nothing worked. And I can go into great lengths like the detail, but that was a problem. It was frustrating. Everyone was trying to take advantage of you. It was expensive. It was litigious. And it was deeply unsexy. Like nowadays, Epidemic might come across as quite sexy because it's music and it's media and whatnot. But in the early days, it was a niche market. Like we did background music. Like when I would tell people at dinner parties that I work in like elevator music, they would like, oh, this guy is so boring. But that was kind of on purpose. I wanted to portray this as small and boring because I didn't want any competitors. So stumbled on a problem, fell in love with it. And that's the true story. And then it grew from there.
Obviously, I know this story well, but maybe also for the audience, you can give a bit of the kind of founding story for FlatPay, without saying multiple times that it's the fastest growing unicorn in Denmark and faster than Lunar and blah blah. Like the polite version.
Yeah, there's the let's say the polished version, where we talk about that we worked a lot of years for Verisure, and they were owned by the same PE firm as Nets. That's the incumbents in Denmark. We found some inspiration and yada yada yada. But I think actually most importantly, I didn't want to work for the rest of my life, and I figured that if that was the case, then I could probably not, let's say, keep working for others, and also I was not having as much fun as I thought I should have going to work, and therefore I left my old job and I had like basically a white canvas. So we sat down the four founders of FlatPay, and we didn't even like have an idea on, let's say, where to go. And we just ended up like going back, having payments on the list, all of us, and then concluding, okay, let's try and understand all the things we don't understand. We probably had like 100 meetings with people from our network and introductions that they made. And then we figured out, okay, physical payments, selling payment terminals is still 10x bigger than online. It was still, and are still growing faster in absolute terms than e-commerce. We thought we could utilize field sales as a go-to-market model in this space, and then we just started like going. We got the first couple of customers without even having a website, without the terminals functioning. Like the first couple of customers we onboarded, you couldn't use your like PIN code. Luckily, it was at a bar. So what really happened was that there were like a lot of young people, they came. So you could still pay with Apple Pay and Google Pay. You could also pay with contactless under 50 euros, but everything with your card above 50 euros, it would just say incorrect PIN, even though it was the right one, right? But the people behind the bar simply just thought that they're just too drunk to remember their PIN code, because they could not imagine that the terminal wouldn't work with a PIN code. And I think we couldn't fix it immediately because we had to go through certification, and we just kept saying like they must just be very drunk, right? And then we paused installing any more customers. But it's quite a funny story.
The purpose for this podcast is mainly speaking about the Nordics, because I'm obsessing about the region that we find ourselves in. I think we have an awesome region. We have an insane great starting point, or an insanely great launch pad for building businesses out of the Nordic region. I recall, I think a few years ago, I was lucky enough to get an invitation for an Obama event, and here in the Nordics. And Obama came on stage and he said, "Look, you guys in the Nordics," not really sounding at all as Obama, but when he came on stage, he said, "You guys in the Nordics, when you come together, you really punch above your weight." And I really recall, and I think at that moment I sat next to a Swedish founder and a Norwegian founder, and we were like, "Yeah, we're the Nordics. So for a quick second, we felt like one region, like a full-on brotherhood across the Nordic countries. And I think there is something magical about the Nordics that, yeah, at least I want to be an advocate and an ambassador for. So maybe Oscar, if we're going into the Nordic path, is there parts of the Nordic mindset that you felt you could utilize when you were scaling Epidemic outside of your home turf?
Yeah, I mean, tons of it. I think that probably the first thing that comes to mind, and guys, cut me off anytime, right, and compliment, but I think trust is the thing that really sticks out. And I think you can break that down into two different components of trust. And so the first one I'd say is more structural. I forget who to give credit, and that's a recurring theme, so I just steal all the credit myself. But somebody said that one of the reasons why the Nordics have been so incredibly successful is that they have so much trust in their institutions. And the way he exemplified that is that in other countries or places around the world, citizens tend to spend a lot of time debating whether or not they're paying the right amount of tax or getting the right kind of healthcare, or if they're standing in the right queue, or if like the system is going to work their advantage or not. And so like enormous amounts of energy from every single person in society is spent trying to either understand the system or worse still, like game the system. I think in the Nordics, and this is the structural point to trust, like shit works. Our office in Stockholm is in the old IRS building. And I know that because we had this person who came to visit us once, and he said that I used to work here. And I was a software developer at the local IRS in Sweden, which is called Skatteverket. And my job was, I walked in here and I was a bit cocky and I said, look, I want to make sure that every single Swedish person can pay their taxes like once a year by just getting a text message and pressing yes. Like it's a one-click button. And the IRS was like, holy shit, if you can pull that off, that's amazing. And off they went to work, and that's exactly what they did. So for the last 10 years, like I get a text message, I sort of look at the number, this looks correct, and then I press go. And so I have a huge amount of trust in the system, like from paying my taxes to healthcare to school to benefits. Like Sweden's even, we stand in line. Like, and so I think structural trust just creates so much efficiency because you basically take away millions of hours of debating and bullshit and other stuff. And so everyone just goes all in, and you don't need, like, we kind of trust agreements as well. And so I don't even have that.
Sorry,
Yeah,
can you lean on that trust as you're scaling outside of Sweden then? Is it something you just take with you for other countries and then anticipate the same level of trust as you're going into new territories and new markets?
I'd say that the answer is yes and no. And I can give the US as a concrete example. And so we try to do the same thing in the US, as in lean on the trust model. And speaking generally, like it failed until we changed the model. And I think that the reason it failed is, I think in the Nordics, another thing that we've done well, which is trust, is like we've collectivized risk, right? And so, yes, we pay a fair amount of taxes, but we get so much for that setup. And so if we stumble, if we fall, if our first endeavor fails, so Epidemic is my sixth company, like schooling is free, healthcare is free, like everything works. So we get a second, third, fourth bite at the apple. And so that allows us to trust the system, and off we go. In the US, we learned the hard way that that's not the case. Like if you lose your job, you fall on your face, let alone fall on your ass. And so people aren't incentivized to trust that process. And so they'll tell you what they think you want to hear, because if you lose your job, nobody catches you. Like it's a dire situation. And so no matter how hard we would try to explain it, so tell us the truth rather than what we want to hear, because as long as we know what's going on, we can solve everything. But we couldn't break through. So eventually what we had to do is we had to take a Scandinavian, somebody from the north who we'd work with, who knew our system, and we would send them out to different markets. And they could be like the hostage in the US office or in the, sort of the French office, saying, no, they're actually not going to fire you. Trust me. Like I can give my boss bad news. I can call him an idiot and say that he or she is wrong. And look, I get to live another day. So you can bring it, but you have to show them that it's for real, because a lot of people just don't trust it. I don't know, Sander, can you relate?
Yeah, like it's exactly the same. Like it's also been the philosophy for FlatPay ever since going outside of Denmark. We've always shipped people from the company that knows that that's exactly how we want it. Like we want to make sure that people, they like we have a saying that like there's an obligation to descend. saying like if you disagree, you can't leave and then bitch and moan about it afterwards. You have to say it in that meeting, and you have to let people know that you disagree. Um, and I think honestly, for the people working, let's say in Italy or in France, where they're used to, let's say, steeper organizations, more politics, maybe also more politeness. I think it has been quite a change for them. They definitely like it. I think the Nordic value is about being included and feeling seen. I think, like, I often get the question on like whether that is a Nordic value. I think it's a human fundamental value, but I think nonetheless it doesn't live to the greatest extent in those markets. So people are quite surprised when they feel it. But I feel like it's working extremely well.
Well, what about Sandra? You used the word politeness there also, and just looking at our own region, did you guys feel the differences between our own Nordic countries? Maybe I'll start with a funny story that connects to you, Oscar, because I met your CFO in Sweden. We were sharing a stage at Epicenter, and she came with a blue eye, and I said, "Oh my God, what happened? Did your husband beat you up?" And she cracked up laughing, saying, "That's so funny and so Danish. No Swede will ever ask a person they never met about that before." So did you see and experience the differences from our Nordic cultural standpoints from each country?
Yeah, so the day before yesterday, I was in. Sorry, I'll make you start.
Yeah, go ahead,
But,
Sam.
the day before yesterday, I was in Helsinki, and I can assure you that the Finns are quite different from the Danes, the Swedes and the Norwegians as well. And Rasmus, my co-founder, he always pulls up the 2x2 matrix on the Nordics, where you have politeness on one axis, and then you have humor on another axis. And we normally say that the Norwegians, they're both funny and polite. And the Swedes, they're not funny, but they're very polite. The Danes are rude but very funny, and the Finns, they're neither, right? They're neither funny, neither polite.
I love that 4x4.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think you have a Danish or Nordic company culture that you're bringing beyond, or is it built internationally from the get-go?
Yeah, so I think to some extent we try to be quite Danish. So even though I can be bragging and I can be less humble, I think ultimately I have quite a low ego, and that's also what we try to push down the organization. We try to look for low ego, and it actually seems like it's working fairly well. Then there are like many other places where we're not very Danish or very Nordic. For example, we do like a very big management team, so it's not, let's say, divided into smaller groups. I don't know, max 5 people or like reporting to someone. Like we wanna try and bring it together. So I think the management team now is like 21 people. So we're 21 people on one call.
That's a big management team.
Well, so you can't even call it a team, right? But like it's everybody on the same call. We do like 1 hour, 1 hour a week. Feedback is given live. Of course, if it's a very personal feedback, then we try to give it separately. But if it's something not working in the country, if it's, I don't know, ideas, feedback, it's giving live in that meeting in front of everybody. Like let's say both ways, and that's not very Nordic.
Yeah, you didn't want to call it a team, but that rather large group of people is a mix of different nationalities.
Yeah.
So the ones that are not from the Nordics or not from Denmark in this example, how do they take the Danish directness?
Yeah, so I think they have to ease into it. But like typically what will have happened is that they will have had some kind of Danish colleague. When we opened the market, it has most often been a Dane that has done that. So they work quite closely with that person and seen how it works before they then take over themselves. But like it still takes some work to make them, let's say, be honest and more, let's say, open. And if you take an Italian colleague, they don't want to look stupid in front of other people. But we try to teach everybody that it's not you looking stupid. It's just you speeding up things, having a shorter way to take good decisions and getting good help.
Collective learning, like in real time, right?
Exactly.
So I can add 2 reflections to that. So one positive, one negative. I think on the positive, I can relate similar to Sander. I think that Nordic companies very much tend to be meritocracies instead of being hierarchies. And so we often get a lot of shit in the Nordics that we're consensus driven, Swedes more than most, I guess. And it does has its drawbacks. I can get to that later on, especially as the business becomes bigger, because it slows people down. But I think that the part which is overlooked, which is a massive positive, is I had all these friends who were investment bankers in London. And over the years, they told me that like the Italians would sort of beat their chest and say like, we're so quick, they get a task, they start running immediately, but then they also in disarray start fighting with each other. The project crashes down, they change direction 3-4 times and nothing gets pushed across the line. The Brits and the Americans, they're super hierarchical. And so the boss tells everyone, this is the direction we're running to. Everyone knows it's a cliff, but you don't dare say anything because you're going to get fired. And so everyone just runs off the cliff and salutes. And then the Nordics, they tend to sit in the room and they don't get shit done because everyone debates and the person who's the boss puts out an idea and the rest of the team says, yeah, Ken, that's a shitty idea, but there's 5% which is good in that and I'll take that and I'll make it 95% better. And everyone debates for like 5, 10, 15 minutes and the feeling is that the tortoise is going nowhere. But then eventually everyone agrees to Sander's point because the whole group has spoken, like they're not afraid of speaking their mind and suddenly there's a much better plan than the Italians, the Americans and the English and they start running and they get it across the line much quicker than everyone else. So I think that's an example of where like people ridicule the consensus, but done correctly and managed right, I think you can get outsized returns and it can be very, very fast. So that's like a beautiful component of us being humble and allowing like the best ideas to win instead of like the highest ranking individual. But then the flip side, and this is a very like personal lived experience, was that our humbleness can sometimes be to our detriment. So in the early days when Epidemic launched, and this is 18 years ago, but back then there was this in part it was because there was this German company called Rocket Internet and they made a business out of copying successful companies and then competing the shit out of them. And so we had as a plan, like, don't do any PR, don't tell anyone what we're doing, like let's try and get to critical mass, escape velocity, and we think it's a winner take most market. So let's be super humble, like sell down what we're doing, keep a low profile. And so we did it in part for that reason, but we also did it in part because I think Swedes in general and sort of Nordic, I think, keen to hear your approach here. I love to under-promise and over-deliver. It's just a much more gratifying way to live your life. If you're constantly the other way around, like you feel like an imposter and you're always stressed, and no matter how well you do, like no one's ever happy. So I was always like, let's under-promise and over-deliver. And so we kept a super low profile. And that in hindsight, I think was probably the wrong idea because as we started to pick up momentum, like people started to hijack our story, imprinted sort of, a picture of who we were, that we were about like taking shortcuts and that we weren't playing fair because we had such a different approach to the music industry. Like our tactical and strategic advantages of coming outside the system and doing it differently basically got hijacked, and so it took a long time to try and get rid of that. We were seen as like the smartest guys in the room, but we were sort of too hard, sort of forcing our way forward. And so that's like examples when it works and when it arguably didn't work.
Do you think that Nordic mindset can it be a competitive advantage?
I think it depends on the macro. I think that for the last 10, 15 years, I think it's served at least our company super well because you get the meeting, enter the room, people have low expectations, and then you just take them by surprise. It's like when you want to sell an apartment, let's say that there are 5 components with the apartment which are really great. And the last one is that there's this beautiful balcony that's so you can see the ocean. If you put together the ad, you don't want to put all 5 in there. Like you rather put 3 things in there. So people who come to the apartment, they get to feel themselves that they've uncovered 2 additional benefits. And so they feel vested. They feel like, wow, I know something that the market doesn't. Our approach and my approach to selling has always been similar. Like if I have 3, 4 great USPs, I'll maybe give 2 so we get the meeting, but then in the meeting, I'll let people discover and be overwhelmed. They're like, shit, we have to test this product. And so I think that can be like hugely beneficial.
Yes, I think maybe a place where it's not very beneficial is when you're fundraising, right? Because when you meet American investors that are used to seeing like overly aggressive plans, they will discount you the same level as they will discount that very, very overly aggressive plan. Your plan might be, let's say, even a bit conservative or just realistic. But if they're discounting it to the same extent as they're discounting that overly aggressive plan, you lose, right? And I think it was actually you who, at least in the past, Ken, said like triple, double, right? And lots of people have said that before, but I think I heard it from you the first time. And I think Flatpay is a good example of that. So when we put together the plan for the seed round, I think we had put into the plan that we were going to be the same number of customers out of 27 that we left 23 with, right? So and Flatpay was founded in the middle of 22, right? So we thought that in 27, we would essentially reach the goal that we did in 23. So I think if I could do something, let's say over, I would be much more ambitious, both on stuff like, let's say traction, product roadmap, and like the vision, where we have tried to stay humble and realistic.
I think I have a copy of your very first pitch deck somewhere on my computer. And it's probably the most humble pitch deck I've ever seen. It's like, we need a small investment round at a couple of €100,000, and that will take us 5 years into operations. And the second year, we'll make 1,800 clients. And then year one, you do like a gazillion clients and become a unicorn and hire 1,000 people. So the delta between that humbleness and then what you pull off is shy of impressing.
We're probably sweat a bit more during the fundraising process than many others, right? And if we had, let's say, built a more aggressive plan, I think more would have believed that it was possible.
I probably pitched 500-600 VCs. I did it in a CRM system over the early days, and I recall a specific US VC who was freaking amazing. They came to Copenhagen on a couple of occasions. I flew out to Palo Alto, and then at the end they said, "Look, we're not going to be able to do this investment, but we're going to give you the full investment analysis we did internally, and we're going to share it and walk it through with you so you understand why we're not doing it." And they basically said, like in the presentation, yeah, it's most likely if everything pays off, it's going to be, north of $1 billion. That's going to be super well, but that's not enough for us. Like, it needs to get closer to 20 or 50 billion for us to consider it. So it was kind of an eye-opener for, okay, well, if you're going outside of our small humble region here, you really need to be a bit more aggressive to wheel in the big dollars.
So I think that fundraising is one great example, but I'd also argue like the general pace of things today in an AI world also doesn't lend itself super well to be humble. I think that because of the pace of change, like people are announcing stuff that isn't even built yet, like to a much greater extent. So they're sort of selling future promises, future sort of token efficacy, future capabilities before they're even launched, just to have a chance to sort of get their message out there because the rate of change is so quick. So I'd say that that's an additional macro which maybe lends itself less well to the super humble approach, which is again why I think the three of us now, as we run our businesses, are obviously much less humble, much more eager to communicate, so clearer, faster, harder, stronger, as it were.
Sander, you've been rather political over the last couple of months here to the Danish election. In regards to both taxation as a great example, do you think how's your view on the challenges that you're facing as trying to scale a business from outside of Denmark? And you can talk into potential IPOs as well, because Denmark haven't really seen anyone for many years, especially not in technology. So how's your view on all of those challenges?
Yeah, so I think actually that my politic let's say interest was short-lived. I normally don't engage into politics, but like when something is too stupid, I have to speak up, and I feel like I also have a small.
Dude, I would vote you PM any day. Just go for it. When you're done on Flatpay, you go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. No. So I think in general I don't have too many opinions on politics, but I think obviously the IPO market in Europe has almost dried out, and let's say the further we scale a company like Flatpay, the more likely, let's say, an IPO becomes. But we're also still like less than 4 years into the journey, and we're not, let's say, spending too much time on that yet, actually, to be honest.
What about you, Oscar? You had any obstacles of being Swedish besides fundraising and maybe being too humble in the formative years?
Yeah, I think that politically, I don't normally speak to that either. I'd say just two things, like friction and incentives. Like get rid of friction and align incentives. It's that simple in theory, and then in practice, I know it's more difficult. But like friction, allow for people to move to our part of the world. Like make it easy to set up a life here, set up social security, set up schools, build housing if you're in some capital, affordable such. And so there are tons of things, and incentives are also sort of around packages and sort of when you pay tax and when you don't, right? So those things I'd say are the obvious. But otherwise, I'd say something that we've had to think about a bit. I mean, Copenhagen is such a beautiful place 24/7. I think we've sometimes had to plan around the seasons because let's be honest, 9 months out of 12, like this is an acquired taste. Like it's coffee. Like, you have to learn to love it. And so if you're looking to attract a global talent pool, you better hustle your ass off as soon as you hit May, June, July, August. That's the only time you can fly people over. And you go like, yeah, it's like this all the time. Everyone is outside. People sort of enjoy themselves. This is amazing. This is what you're buying into. You get them signed off. So then they move in August, September, and then reality hits in. And so I joke a little bit, right? But still, it's a bit of an acquired taste. Like Swedes are introvert. It's dark a lot. And so you need to take care of people coming here, making sure that they are in it for the long run. Because I think one of the things which is underlooked or undervalued, but we get from the model is we actually care long term about building relationships. And so if you hire the right people and they stick around, like somebody sticking around, learning the business, learning the ropes, like picking up speed, like having them stay, that just compounds because your company becomes so much quicker if you're having to rehire constantly because people keep on sort of moving and you lose them. And so getting people to stick and stay and hiring well and doing that at the right time of year, I think that's an important hack to get them to come.
I like crazy in many forms. That's also why
you're the personalized version of crazy, Sander. So don't be humble about that.
No, and I think like in Denmark, it's not, let's say, it's not okay to be too crazy, right? That's also why I hate politics, right? They're so polished and they don't ever say their opinion, and like you just can't feel them, right? And I like crazy, so you don't have too much crazy in Denmark, and that's actually why sometimes I like to travel to countries like Italy and France, because they are just a little more crazy. And of course, obviously in the US, they're even more crazy.
Not more crazy than you are, my friend. Like I recall you and I went to a Christmas party a couple of months ago where some of the VCs were debating who's the most crazy one. Is it Ken or is it Sander? And I think just from my memory, you took that first prize without competition. Like
I recall your wife had to come and pick you up because you were pitching investors the day after.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the truth.
And I think it was at this event that Lars Andersen, who's an investor in both of our companies, I tried to teach him this new Sambuca trick, where you take Sambuca into the mouth and then you light your mouth on fire. And then you close your mouth, right? You light your finger on fire and then you put the finger into your mouth and then you have fire out of your mouth, right? But what Lars what Lars here did, he started coughing when he had turned it to like on fire. So he was spewing flames.
He's a flamethrower.
He was a flamethrower, like to someone at HSBC. So he basically spit fire on her live at that Christmas party.
Sander, I think everything is correct in that story, besides the fact that you called it a new Sambuca trick.
I'm from Slagelse again, right? So,
yeah, I recall.
Things that I played down there.
So before we just go nuts on Sambuca and and spitting fire, I wanted to chat a bit with you guys about the community in the Nordic region, because you're both really experienced founders, and I think in many ways you also have somewhat of a responsibility in helping at a minimum the local community of technology to rising also with everything you've been through and all the great experiences you had. So how active are you think both of you are in contributing to the local community?
Yeah, like I think for me it's quite simple, right? I obviously like as you scale a business, as you become more successful, you start getting invited to all sorts of random stuff, and I live by the principle that I don't do any events. I don't do any let's say like public speaking. I don't attend any dinners. I basically don't do anything else than if it's towards other people trying to build a startup. Like that's the only time when I put time aside. That's the only time when I participate, when all the bankers, they want to have dinner, when they want to have me, I don't know, speaking at some kind of corporate event, like I always say no. But when it's speaking to fellow startup people, I always attend, or at least try to make time. If people, they, I don't know, send me an email, reach out on LinkedIn, I always try to respond. I don't do any business angel investing. I don't feel like I have any alpha. But in general, I try to give back, and I try to be there.
I think Sander, what's great about that is that that's a kind of personal view from your side, because going to all of the shit that you just mentioned, I know that for all the dinners, you're sending one of your other co-founders, and to all of the events, another co-founder is joining. So that's the positive side of having co-founders in a company that you're building and scaling with. You can divide and conquer. So I've had dinners with Rasmus, and I've seen the two other guys or a couple of the other co-founders at numerous events. What about you, Oscar?
So I think maybe complementing that, a couple of things come to mind. I think that one of the reasons why I believe the Nordics to be successful is that our home markets are like relatively small, right? And so initially I remember thinking of that as a setback, but over the years I really came to appreciate it, because a consequence of having a small home market is that you have to think big from day one, like, because you know your home market isn't going to be able to carry your ambition. And so you have to think about exporting the business, exporting your ideas, and going internationally. And so that lends itself super well, because like, if you have to be of that mind, that conviction, there's so many things that you need to learn. And I think that there's this old quote, is it Isaac Newton, who claimed that he was standing on the shoulders of giants. I think it's such a beautiful phrase. And so I try and think about that quite often, because that's exactly how I feel that we were able to scale. There were great entrepreneurs before us, whether it was IKEA by Kamprad or something more recent, like the team over at Spotify, but they've always been super generous towards myself, like reaching out, helping this small, insignificant part of the world, which is the Nordics, to really grow and scale and to be successful. So I feel as though I'm a small chain in this link of people trying to pay it forward, as Sander's saying. And so that, I think, is something you should take seriously and put time towards it. I do all the other events as well, like when they make sense. So you need to mix it up a bit, I guess, or I've prioritized that. Sometimes it's a good decision, sometimes maybe not. But I think that also besides events, which is more like one-to-many, I think something which I've always prided myself in doing is I try and do really good intros. So like once a week, I'll do a proper intro and spend some time where like somebody's reached out, they need a help, and I'll give them a leg up, and I'll do some research, and I'll sort of, this is Ken, he's great at X, Y, and Z, and then quirky fact, and this is the other person, he or she is great X, Y, Z, and then quirky fact, which happens to tie into you guys. This is something you should talk about. And immediately I feel as though like connecting super smart people, A, makes the world a better place, and B, it makes me look super good, because if I can just piggyback on two other great individuals and be the connector, and then that's a beautiful thing. So I think you can do it in the small one-on-one, or you can do it in the bigger setting. But I definitely see it as being part of a bigger chain where, like, if you're fortunate enough to have the kind of experiences and to some extent successes we have, like, you owe it to pay it forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good inspiration to like, I don't know, future startup founders, that like you can almost always reach out to like local founders. Like I don't think I can recall a time where I tried to reach out to someone. And if I did my homework, like they all replied, they all came back, they all wanted to speak, and all wanted to help.
If you're young and hungry, like you should hunt Sander down, or yourself, Ken, or me. I think it's less about the responsibility of us gray farts. Like we should lead more. Day to day is crazy. Like the amount of travel, work, sort of wreckage we cause to our private lives is quite significant. And so I think I would rather send an encouragement, because I'm of the same opinion as Sander. Getting a hold of me is super easy. Like even my phone number is out there. Everyone has my emails, of LinkedIn, whatever your poison, right?
We started this pod with me sharing your phone number. So I don't know, the 48 viewers for this pod will all see your phone number.
Yeah. which just sort of adds to the list. But that's how I would see it. What do you guys feel? You were super eager to reach out to people, and I think that's kind of like a good test as well. I think a big part of building companies is willing to willing to embarrass yourself, basically, like socially, commercially, financially, like embarrass yourself.
I'm an expert on all of the before mentioned.
Like you can't be too much up your own ass that you're not able to embarrass yourself, right? And like I like maybe it's a crazy part, but like I actually like to be embarrassed, right? And it also means that if you like being embarrassed, you are not embarrassed, right? Then it's just fun or an experience, or like might be a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning. But I think the only place where I think that people have an obligation if they've done well is on the inspiring part, right? I think we have a problem across the Nordics on maybe people super skilled working in corporate settings, but not, let's say, being willing to take the risk because they have a house, a car, and a family. And then it can be perceived as a very big risk taking that jump. So I think if we can encourage or inspire people to become founders, to build their own startup, I think that's maybe where I think we could play a more active role. But I really agree with you, Oscar. I think it's on the individual. If you want to get a hold of you, right, you need to reach out.
Which, again, as we're acknowledging, it's difficult because while you're running at 110, just carving out the time to fly back to Denmark or to Stockholm when you happen to be around the world to give that inspirational talk to a room of people where maybe 1 or 2 of 400 might become a founder one day, as opposed to the 10 people who've already started a company and are asking for your help. It's a difficult trade-off, right? So, but I agree. I think inspiration is important. And again, hopefully the 22 people who watch your podcast here, Candace, we might inspire them. But that's why you have to do these things.
Yeah, look, and bringing you two in, I'm sure we're gonna hit 50 viewers or 50 listeners this time.
And
so I can't wait for this going viral. You know, we're probably gonna getting 5-6 likes. So, but I think I think that's a great segue into concluding remarks, because it was great having you both on. I really appreciated the candid chat. Hope the next time we're going to do this, because we have to do this one more time, it'll be in person here in Copenhagen.
Likewise, Ken, and likewise, Oscar. Yeah.
Likewise, Ken and Sander. This was great. And next time, I'd love to do this in person. I think that those dynamics would be super cool.
I'll bring beer. Sander will bring Sambuca, so we can see this brand new Sambuca trick that he just heard of in Slagelse. And
and I'll bring the music.